Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
From AI-inspired insights from farmers.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here, we'd love to hear from you too.
Absolutely.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and definitely leave a comment telling us what you want to see more of on this deep dive.
We're always looking for new ideas, and we really value your feedback.
So what farm-related mysteries are you dying to uncover?
Right.
What questions are keeping you up at night? Let us know, and maybe we'll tackle them in a future deep dive. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into the forces that are really shaking up food prices and supply right now.
That's right. We're focusing particularly on the egg market, but it has wider implications, especially if you're involved in farming or maybe thinking about starting one.
And to get a handle on this, we've pulled information from a few key places.
Yeah, we've looked at a European Parliament study on AI in agriculture, a NerdWallet piece on egg prices and tariffs, some Economic Times reporting about bird flu's impact,
A BBC article on AI adoption over in the U.S.
Yeah.
And insights from Michigan State University Extension on how bird flu hits egg prices.
so quite a range of sources.
Our goal here is really to connect the dots, between things like the ongoing bird flu outbreaks, inflation, supply chain snags.
And crucially, for anyone listening who's considering farming, how technology like AI might actually help navigate these, well, pretty choppy waters.
Okay, so let's start with the most immediate factor, the one grabbing headlines. Bird flu.
Indeed. This highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, it's causing major disruption, especially for U.S. egg producers.
How major are we talking?
Well, the NerdWallet analysis mentioned a really startling number. Nearly 126 million commercial egg-laying hens affected just since February 2022.
126 million. Wow, that's bound to hit supply hard.
Absolutely. It directly shrinks the egg supply, and that pushes prices up dramatically.
And those price hikes have been steep. I saw the Economic Times reported something like a 65% jump since just January 2024.
That's right, 65%. And anecdotally, you hear about prices hitting $10 a dozen, even more in some areas.
$10, yeah. That definitely makes you notice the cost of breakfast.
It really does. And it's important to understand the official response here. The USDA policy is quite stark.
What's the policy exactly?
Both the Economic Times and MSU Extension point this out. If bird flu is detected in any flock, the entire flock has to be culled.
The whole flock, regardless of how big or small the farm is.
Exactly. Doesn't matter if it's a huge operation or a smaller one. It's a measure to stop the spread, but obviously has severe consequences for production. And for the farmers.
So even if you're a new farmer, maybe starting small, you face that same risk. And the Economic Times noted it's not just conventional farms, right? Cage-free, organic.
Yeah.
They're getting hit too.
Yes, significantly affected. It seems no production style is immune, which is tough news if you were considering those niches.
And there's a seasonal pattern to this, isn't there? Something about wild birds.
There is, yeah. Both the Economic Times and MSU mention spikes often align with wild bird migrations, typically spring and fall.
But it's not just seasonal.
No, that's the tricky part. Outbreaks can potentially happen year-round, so it adds this constant layer of risk for poultry farmers.
And getting back online after an outbreak isn't quick.
Not at all. The Economic Times outlines the recovery process. It takes months. You've got carcass disposal, deep cleaning, barn sanitation.
And then raising new chicks until they're old enough to lay.
Precisely. It's a long pause in production, which means a significant income hit.
And I read it's even spread beyond chickens to cattle.
Yes, the Economic Times reported that. It does raise concerns, especially for farm worker safety.
But the risk to consumers eating eggs or poultry is still low?
Correct. The guidance remains that properly cooked eggs and poultry are safe. Sick animals don't enter the food supply, and cooking to 165 Fahrenheit kills the virus. So that's reassuring.
Okay, so bird flu is a huge driver of these egg prices, but it's happening against a backdrop of wider economic issues, right? Inflation.
Exactly. You can't really separate the two completely. Bird flu hit the supply side hard, but it's amplified by these broader inflationary pressures on food costs in general.
How much of an outlier are eggs then?
NerdWallet had a striking comparison. Egg prices up 49.3% year over year. Compare that to overall food prices up about 2.8%.
Wow. So eggs are way out in front, but everything's generally creeping up.
Pretty much. It shows the specific impact on eggs, but also that broader trend.
And NerdWallet also flags something about tariffs potentially keeping prices high.
Yeah, they mentioned newly imposed tariffs could make it harder for egg prices to come back down. It's a reminder that trade policy filters down to what you pay at the grocery store.
It's not just market shocks like bird flu then. There are underlying costs, too.
Absolutely. The European Parliament study really highlighted this. Farmers are grappling with rising costs for, well, everything. Labor, fuel, seeds, fertilizer, water, crop protection.
The basic inputs.
The basic inputs. And often, these cost increases are outpacing what they can actually earn. It creates a really tough economic climate, even without something like bird flu happening.
It really does sound like a system under pressure. Which leads us to the supply chain itself. How do these issues ripple through to actually getting food distributed?
Well, with eggs specifically, the bird flu outbreaks cause very direct, visible disruptions. The Economic Times and NerdWallet both talk about this.
Like empty shelves.
Yeah. Empty shelves, yeah. Or stores putting limits on how many cartons you can buy. You might even see restaurants adding surcharges for egg dishes because their costs went up.
I think many of us have seen those limit to carton signs lately.
Exactly. And the Economic Times mentions some grocers just weren't receiving their full orders. They'd order a certain amount but only get a fraction, leading to low stock.
So the egg situation is kind of a clear example of wider supply chain weaknesses.
It is. The European Parliament study refers to the whole thing as the agri-food supply chain, or AFSC. It's incredibly complex, so many steps from farm to fork.
And vulnerable.
And vulnerable. Global shocks, like the pandemic, really drove home the need for more resilient food systems, as the study points out. Systems that can better absorb these kinds of disruptions.
It all feels very interconnected. A problem in one spot sends ripples everywhere. So, bottom line, what does this all mean for us, the consumers?
Well, the most direct impact is on our wallets, unfortunately. Higher egg prices, potential increases in other food costs due to these pressures. It just costs more to buy groceries.
Especially tough for people on tight budgets.
Absolutely. It erodes purchasing power. And beyond price, it's also about availability.
Right, those empty shelves are just not finding certain things.
Exactly. You might face shortages or just less choice sometimes because of these supply chain hiccups.
And all these consequences, the prices, the availability, they loop right back to the decisions facing farmers, especially new ones.
They really do. If you're starting out, you have to think hard about what you're going to produce, how you'll manage costs in this volatile environment, and how to build a business that can actually weather these storms.
Which brings us to potential solutions or maybe survival strategies. How can new farmers build that viable business now?
This is where technology comes into the picture. Both the European Parliament study and the BBC article talk about the growing role of automation and artificial intelligence, AI, in agriculture.
Is this becoming mainstream?
It's moving that way. It's seen as a response to some major challenges.
Yeah.
Labor shortages, for one.
Yeah, the BBC mentioned the average farmer age is heading towards 60, and fewer young people are taking over.
That's a big factor. The European Parliament study noted similar trends in Europe. Lots of farmers over 55, not many young entrants. AI offers ways to potentially ease that labor pressure.
And it helps with sustainability, too.
That's the idea. AI can lead to more efficient farming. Think precision agriculture. The European Parliament study gives some good examples relevant for new farmers.
Like what specifically?
Okay, so in crop production, using big data, sensors, even agri-robots for smarter crop planning. Using machine learning to predict yields better or optimize how much water or fertilizer you use.
So less waste, better targeting.
Exactly. And robots for tasks like weeding or very precise spraying. Plus, using sensors and AI to monitor crop health constantly, catching problems early.
Water management seems huge, too, especially with climate change, making weather less predictable.
Definitely critical. The study mentions AI integrating data from weather stations, soil sensors, remote sensing, all to figure out the most efficient irrigation schedule.
Real-time adjustments.
Yeah, monitoring the water supply in real time, detecting leaks, even varying irrigation across a field based on forecasts and current conditions, using water much more effectively.
That sounds incredibly useful, especially if you're just starting out and don't have decades of experience to draw on. But are there barriers to adopting this? It sounds expensive, maybe complicated?
There are definitely challenges. The European Parliament study is realistic about this. You need the right infrastructure, like reliable internet, which isn't everywhere rurally.
Sure.
Data is key, too. The AI is only as good as the data it learns from, so you need quality data. And farmers need the skills, the digital literacy to actually use these tools.
And maybe getting locked into one company's system.
That's another potential concern, yes. Relying on specific corporate technologies. So it's not just plug and play.
Requires investment, learning.
It does. But the study suggests that even just starting by focusing on collecting good data and understanding what AI could do for your specific operation is a really smart strategic move for new farmers. Build that foundation.
That makes sense. Lay the groundwork for the future. Okay, that covers a lot of the immediate challenges and tech solutions. We also wanted to touch on a slightly more forward-looking idea.
Right. Given all this volatility, especially in animal protein like eggs, it makes sense to think about alternative protein sources. This wasn't the main focus of our sources today, but it's definitely a growing area.
You mean things like plant-based options or maybe cultivated meat down the line?
Exactly. And related to that, we might see policy shifts start to encourage these alternatives more.
What kind of policies are we talking about?
It could be things like more funding for R&D, clearer regulations so these products can come to market smoothly, maybe even incentives for farmers to diversify into producing these alternatives.
So diversifying the food system itself could help ease some of these long-term pressures.
That's the potential, yeah. It could make the whole system more resilient and maybe even help take some inflationary pressure off traditional proteins over time. It's certainly something for new farmers to keep an eye on strategically.
That's a really interesting angle for future planning. Okay, so let's wrap this up. We've seen how bird flu delivered a major shock, especially to egg prices.
A shock that landed in an environment already stressed by inflation and ongoing supply chain weaknesses.
And consumers feel that directly higher prices at the checkout, sometimes trouble finding things.
But it's not all doom and gloom. Technology, particularly AI, offers real potential pathways forward for farmers.
By helping tackle things like labor shortages, making operations more efficient, managing resources like water better.
Right. It could be a key tool for building more resilient, sustainable farms, especially if you're just starting out.
So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. If you're entering agriculture now, how can you strategically weave in these emerging technologies? And perhaps, how might you think about diversifying, maybe even exploring some of these alternative proteins to build a business that's truly adaptable for the long haul in this complex landscape?
It requires thinking ahead, being proactive, and looking for the opportunities hidden within the challenges. We hope this exploration has been valuable. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Hitting that like button and smash that subscribe.